I would like to continue now by talking about a wiggle expression. For that, I'm going to create yet another composition, and I'm just going to call it wiggle. NTSCDV is fine. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a little oval shape thing. Now, I'm going to go and apply a wiggle expression to the position of this layer. P for position, and I'll enable the expression, alter option, and click on the stopwatch. Now, when it comes to wiggle, you only need to really remember two things. How often, that means frequency, always measured in times per second, and how much. How much is always measured in whatever units the property that you are applying the expression to is measured. For example, for rotations, it would be degrees. For position, it's going to be pixel coordinates. For scale, it's going to be percentages, etc., etc. So, to write a wiggle expression, all you need to do is write the word wiggle. Open parentheses. Now, how often is always first, so I'll have it at, say, 2 per second. Comma. And now, how much? I'll give it maybe 50 pixel coordinates. And I'll close the parentheses. Done. If we do a RAM preview, the ball is just going to wiggle all over the place. We can turn these into keyframes by just selecting the property and going to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Convert Expression to Keyframes. But we're not going to do that right now. The next thing that we can do is that we can control this wiggle by using a slider effect. So, I'm going to go ahead and create a null object. Layer, New, Null Object. To this null object, I'm going to add an effect. Effect, Expression Controls, Slider Controls. And this is how it works. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select just the number 2. So from the wiggle, just the number 2, and I'm going to pick whip to the slider property of the slider control. The expression gets written for me. All I have to do now is keyframe that slider control. So for example, it'll start at 0. Let me go ahead and press the letter U. That way I can work with it on the timeline. So it'll remain at 0 until about 22 frames or so. And then at around here, it's just going to start wiggling. And maybe I'll leave it around 10. There you go. And let's RAM preview that. Static, and then eventually starts wiggling. And I can stop it. I can keyframe it here, move in time, and then change this value to 0, which will stop the wiggling. I can do it with how often and also with how much. In other words, I can do it with frequency, and I can also do it with magnitude. Starts wiggling, remains wiggling, and then eventually is going to stop wiggling. There you go. Slider controls. The next thing that I want to talk about is looping. So I'm going to create a new composition, and I'm just going to call it loop. Click OK, and I'm going to create the same little oval here. And I'll just name it oval. There you go. I'm just going to have this going left, right. P for position. And now I'll just move it on the X, and there you go. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to enable the expression of this property. Option, click on the stopwatch. Now I'm going to go to the expression language menu, and I'll select from property loop out. So loop out type cycle, what's going to happen is that our expression is going to make these two keyframes repeat over and over and over again. So let's preview that. So it's not quite a loop because there is no third keyframe. Let's go ahead and add that. Select the first keyframe and copy, Control or Command C. Place the CTI where you want to paste this and press Control or Command V. Now this will be a loop. The good thing about this one is that if it's moving too slow and the client comes and tells you, no, it's too slow, can you speed it up? You don't have a gazillion keyframes. You have just 3. So you can click on the word position, which will select all 3 of those keyframes, press and hold the Alt or Option key, and just drag these keyframes so that the time span between them is shorter. And there you go, you have a much faster loop. There are different types of loop. For example, I could delete this last keyframe, and instead of cycle, I could type the word ping pong. And now it's going to loop just the same as it did with cycle, because ping pong just goes from keyframe 1 to 2, back to 1, back to 2, which is exactly what the other thing was doing, but with 3 keyframes instead.